I have to hold my hands up and admit that I was pleasantly surprised by my recent read of Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. If you haven't been following my channel, I recently shared that I'm going to be doing a read-along of the Throne of Glass series as a means of experimenting with Sarah J Maas's books. Now, I confess I went into this series with a preconception that I probably wasn't going to like it. Sarah J Maas is well known for her kind of romance elements, and there are series I believe that are kind of far more down the romance route, but I was recommended Throne of Glass because it isn't too heavy on the romance and it would give me a chance to explore some of the kind of the more fantasy elements of her writing style. Thankfully, I'm pleased to say that this first book, Throne of Glass, followed kind of the route I wanted it to. Yes, there are romantic subplots, but it didn't dominate the overall narrative. Throne of Glass has a lot of things you kind of expect in fantasy. There is a very strong kind of protagonist, and I love that it's a female lead in this one. But we have everything from political machinations to dark kind of magic that's going on. There's a mystery in terms of things happening to the other champions in this book. So there are lots of things to get invested into, and that I did. So let me get into the details on this book and then I'll share my thoughts. Throne of Glass is a reasonably short book for a fantasy introduction. It's just over 430 pages, so nothing wild, but plenty enough that we can get enough of a feeler of the overall world that this book is set into, so that enough foundations laid down that we understand what's going on, but obviously there's a lot more to explore. In terms of age range for this book, I would say it's probably kind of for mature teen to adult, just based on some of the themes and some of the kind of descriptions in this book. They're not too bad, but, you know, I wouldn't recommend for a young child. Let's take a look at the synopsis and then I will dive into my thoughts. In a land without magic, an assassin is summoned to the castle. Selena Sardothian has no love for the vicious king who rules in his throne of glass, but she has not come to kill him. She has come to win her freedom. If she defeats 23 murderers, thieves, and warriors in a deadly competition, she will be released from prison to serve as the king's champion. But something rotten dwells in the castle, and it's there to kill. When her competitors start dying mysteriously, one by one, Selena's fight for freedom becomes a fight for survival, and a desperate quest to root out the evil before it destroys her world and the people she has come to love. Now, we start this book in quite an interesting place. There's already a lot that has taken place, and I gather one of the later books in the series kind of goes back to address Selena's backstory, which I'm really looking forward to, because what was kind of laid down in the very opening of this book, where she is picked up from this, effectively it's a death camp, I really was asking questions about what the heck happened in order for her to get there. It's quite a strong start in terms of, you know, laying down a foundation for this character and also having you asking questions as to what's going on. So this kind of ticked a really big box for me. Now, obviously, I'm looking forward to exploring that in a later book, whichever one that is. But for now, enough was hinted at in order to generate enough intrigue around Selena and, you know, her capabilities, why she has kind of developed the reputation that she has, which reflects in how she's treated as part of this competition. She doesn't compete under her own name, because if people knew who she was, like, it would probably garner some fear, also get her some unwelcome interest, particularly from some of the harsher competitors. Now, obviously, the idea of a bunch of kind of thieves and unwanteds being invited to take part in some kind of competition for the king, probably a little bit far-fetched, but it's fantasy. You know, what fantasy isn't a little bit far-fetched, let's be honest. But it was an interesting idea. It's not something I have kind of seen before. So it was an interesting kind of plot device, and obviously it sets up kind of the rest of this book where there are lots of kind of things going on. The main underlying kind of story to this first book is that the champions taking part in this competition start dying, and not under pleasant circumstances. And Selena ends up trying to kind of figure out what's going on, obviously partly for her own safety, but there are other kind of supernatural elements that drag her in and encourage her to kind of get involved. I personally really enjoyed this magical element. I love magic in my fantasy, and the kind of darker tone to it, the symbolism, the kind of illicit knowledge that is hinted at in the fact that not very many people know about what's going on and that sort of thing, was really interesting to me. The local environment, if you like, of where this is set is that magic isn't tolerated, but I believe from what kind of happens that maybe isn't the case throughout the rest of the world, and that is why what happened kind of was able to happen and people not realize why, within the castle sort of thing. But this mystery element was really interesting to me. It gave me something to really want to dig into, and the dark magic just kind of sealed the deal. Now, some of the descriptions of kind of what happens to these people is maybe a little bit visceral, which is why I suggest this book isn't for younger teens, maybe for a little bit older. But equally, I didn't find it off-putting. It wasn't too much. But it is perhaps a little unpleasant, shall we say. Aside from the kind of more localized storyline, the book is very clearly set in a world where there are kind of complex political maneuverings going on. There is a history of kind of war and violence and a bit of oppression going on. So I'm hoping that these are all things that we have kind of laid the foundation down in Throne of Glass, but then we get to explore in more detail in the later books. I kind of hope it kicks off. I know that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but from a fantasy kind of interest point of view, I hope it kicks off. I appreciate this is a very short review of my thoughts on Throne of Glass, but I don't want to kind of bog you down in the detail or spoil anything in the book. If you haven't yet started your read along with me, I would love for you to join me. I'm going to be picking up Crown of Midnight in March. I haven't started it yet, and I deliberately have chosen to record this review before I start the Crown of Midnight, so my thoughts couldn't be modelled with kind of later information in the series. So I'm going to be starting Crown of Midnight very soon, and I will be hosting read-alongs on Storygraph and Fable if you want to join me. Equally, if you want to read Throne of Glass or tell me about what you thought of Throne of Glass, I would love for you to let me know in the comments. I'm looking forward to carrying on with this read-along, and I hope you can join me.